we're BDOs, right? Very hard for us to meet a deal and not find a way to make it work or find a reason to do a deal. But is the final person or committee that signs off on that deal, are they going to like it as presented? And that's the reason you should send a term sheet out. And that's how you should structure your term sheet.
I don't care where it comes from. It's a good deal. It's a good deal.
AOL. Y'all don't know nothing about Hotmail and AOL.
Give me Gmail, Yahoo,
Oh my.
Hotmail, AOL. You can slide me the disc with it with 1,000 free hours. We'll get it.
I remember the discs.
I remember dial-up. Hey everyone, welcome back to the BDO Show, a podcast for passionate BDOs wanting to level up their game with advice and stories from battle-tested BDOs. I'm your co-host, Emily Detour, and I'm here with Sterling Birdsong, Chris Hackney, and Ryan Kroge today. Before we go ahead and start, I always want to remind everybody to like, subscribe, and send us over topics to the BDOshow@gmail.com. Okay, BDOs, it's story time. And no, I am not talking about the time Sterling tried to finance a zoo. You'll have to go back to episode 3 for that. I'm talking about the story that your borrower has in their head, and they may need that extra boost to finally get it onto paper. Rapid Business Plans is a known and trusted partner that can help them do just that. Whether your borrowers are working towards acquiring a business, starting one up, or expanding and making moves, within just a few short days, Rapid Business Plans will deliver powerful, fast, SBA and USDA ready business plans with projections and assumptions. If they need an export business plan for an ITL loan or a feasibility study, they have you covered there too. We know this process is not a walk in the park, or should I say zoo. Let the Rapid Business Plans team take some of the wild out of the process so that your borrower's vision and passions can come to life. For more information or to get acquainted, email Bethany McClellan at bethany@rapidbusinessplans.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, so today we're going to be exploring the topic of term sheets. And my first question is that I'll immediately hand to Sterling is, what exactly is a term sheet for new BDOs or anyone else listening?
So I'll give you a hint. It's in the name. Okay. It's called a term sheet because it should list out all of the terms of your loan. So it should really be kind of a high level overview of the financing that you're signing up for. So for example, it should have what the customer's name is. Usually it's going to be their corporation name. The entity name is going to be there. It's also going to tell you what your loan amount is going to be. It's going to tell you if there's going to be any guarantors. With SBA lending, there's always going to be at least one personal guarantor, so that'll be listed there. Any corporate guarantors will also be listed there. It's going to tell you your loan amount. It's going to tell you your payment, your estimated payment going forward, because obviously we know that these payments are subject to change, especially if it's a floating rate. However, it's going to give you your collateral. Essentially, the whole thought process is we just want you to know what you're signing up for before we actually get into underwriting. We never want a situation where you go through underwriting, all of a sudden we issue you a commitment letter or we don't issue a commitment letter and we just go to a closing table and you don't know what you signed up for. Essentially, this should be high level. Hey, are you in agreement with this? If you are in agreement with this, sign it, send it back to me. We'll typically also collect an expense deposit at this time. And then that's when the actual underwriting process will start.
Now, who issues a term sheet?
Most of the BDOs should issue a term sheet. I know some shops require that if you're a new BDO or if the shop itself is new with a new credit manager, the credit manager or even the sales manager wants to review those term sheets before you actually issue it to your client. But for most BDOs that have been doing this for a long time, most credit managers, most financial institutions let us issue the term sheets directly ourselves. I really like the way that Sterling explained what a term sheet is, primarily because it's an agreement, right? It's really kind of a very light binding agreement, but it's basically me as the BDO showing you the blueprint on how we're going to structure this transaction. But you as the customer or whoever the customer is, you're agreeing to those terms. You're saying, yeah, I like this structure. I like everything that you've laid out here. Because when, like Sterling says, we take an expense deposits, well, if this flips to a commitment and it matches the commitment as it should, if you're a good BDO, then you decide not to commitment. Well, most banks will receive that $2,500 expense deposit as earned as part of our underwriting process because we issued you a term sheet, you agreed to that term sheet, and then the borrower decided to pull out once they got a commitment that matches that term sheet. Well, we don't just do this for fun, right? And it's not like we want to earn money on these deposits, but we've got to be able to cover our overhead somehow for going through the painstaking avenue of going through and getting it to a commitment letter. So it's important that as a BDO, when you issue these term sheets, know your strike zone, know the structure, and know that's something that when it flips to a commitment, it's going to match it.
So I guess let's back up 2 steps here. What are the steps that get a BDO to a term sheet with their borrower? Chris.
You want to collect a financial package at bare minimum. Well, it really depends on what you're financing. If it's a startup, you understand projections, business plan. If it's an acquisition of an existing business, obviously you want to have the financials from the seller of that business. You want to understand the purchase price. Hopefully there's a purchase agreement. If not, a letter of intent. And a personal financial statement that is basically telling you who your buyer or guarantor is, or the person borrowing the money, what's their financial picture. You also want to get maybe a debt schedule depending on what you're financing as well. That at a minimum should be enough to understand if it's a viable deal or not. Now, depending on the complexity of the deal and the use of proceeds, you may need a lot more than that. But what I've found is as a BDO, sometimes you can hinder your process if you're trying to get too much documentation up front and you're pretty much doing the entire underwriting checklist, right? You should be able, and I tell our associate lenders or junior BDOs, don't get analysis paralysis. Get the basic financial package. Who's your buyer? What's their background? Does it fit the business they're buying? What's the cash flow of the business that's to be acquired? Get that. And then you should look at that. Do your spreads. Some shops have the underwriters or credit team that can actually do the spreads for you, or maybe you have an associate lender or junior BDO that can do the spreads for you. You want to look at that and make sure, is this a good deal? And the way I determine if it's a good deal is this not only a deal that I like, is this a deal that my credit manager is going to like and sign off on? There's one thing that we're BDOs, right? Very hard for us to meet a deal and not find a way to make it work or find a reason to do a deal. But is the final person or committee that signs off on that deal, are they going to like it as presented? And that's the reason you should send a term sheet out. And that's how you should structure your term sheet, based upon not just your opinion, but also the opinion of those that are putting power to the pen.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things there is really about finding the balance between when you issue your term sheet versus how much buy-in you have internally on the term sheets that you issue. Because like Chris said, you don't want to just throw them out there on the street if they don't really have any backing or they don't really mean anything. But at the same time, you will lose opportunities if you're slow in issuing term sheets, 100%. This is a competitive business. There's going to be other banks that are probably going to be looking at the same deals that you're looking at. So if you're not very quick in at least getting information turned around and back in front of a customer so they can make a decision, then you will lose opportunities over time. I remember, at a prior bank that I worked at, there was a rule that you couldn't issue a term sheet before you essentially had a meeting with the loan approvers, right? So in this situation, and I'm talking about deals of all sizes. I mean, 200,000, 300,000 didn't matter the deal size. They had a meeting that was one day a week on a Tuesday, and essentially you had to have your loan summary ready to go for that meeting. You had to present it, and if they had questions that you didn't have the answers to, well, guess what? You're coming back next Tuesday. So you just lost essentially 7 days, where another lender who maybe has a little bit more autonomy and is able to say, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and put this term sheet out there. Maybe they already won that deal from you, right? And once a customer has kind of decided on what bank they want to move forward and go down the path with, it's not common that they're going to continue to run dual processes. Some do, and that does happen from time to time, but most are like, hey, I'm picking my horse and this is who I'm going to work with and this is who I want me to shepherd me through this process, essentially. So it is important that you are not just throwing out deals that you can't get home on, but at the same time, you do need to make sure that you're diligent in getting that turned around quickly.
Yeah, that's so important when you're picking who you're going to, real quick, Ryan, to like who you work for, like what's their process to get a term sheet out. Some are more lenient than others as far as giving the BDO autonomy to, issue a term sheet if it's credit worthy. Ryan, go ahead. What were you going to?
I was just going to say less is more.
Right.
Just remember that as a golden rule whenever you're doing these type of transactions. Kind of what Chris was saying earlier. When I ask for financial information or a package in order to be able to put a term sheet, I'm not asking for a full underwrite. I'm, depending on what the request is, I'm asking for the bare minimum that I know I am going to need to be able to put that term sheet together. And as a seasoned BDO, you should be able to look and do a down and dirty spread on those financials and on the structure of the deal to be able to put together something that's going to be beneficial for both the customer and for the bank. Knowing your credit box, knowing the customer, having those interview calls, collecting small financial information up front. Because the last thing you want to do is ask for everything in one long email before you get it off the street. And then the customer looks at that. He wants me to send what? He wants me to send all this information? No way. That's just too much work just to find out what the terms are willing to structure this for. And so you're going to want to get the bare minimum in order to be able to get something like that done.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest mistake. Go ahead.
Sorry, keep going. I was going to say, so you guys are saying that other lenders can issue term sheets as well, and the borrower can just be like, which one do I want based on who's the speediest? And can other lenders issue different information on that term sheet?
Absolutely. And sometimes that can be to your detriment. I have a pretty stark rule that if I get the package that I need to put a term sheet, I like to flip a term sheet within 12 to 24 hours. I want to get it out there fast. And then I'm following it up almost right away with a call saying, hey, just send it to you. Do you have time to go through it so I can answer any questions? Let's go through it together. I want to be able to get that borrower engaged. I want them to let them know that I am there, that I'm accessible, and that the way that I was able to turn that term sheet around quick, that's the way I'm going to turn it quick. And you can never get away from the rate shoppers. You're just going to have those. They just want the term sheet. They don't care about signing a deal right away. They want to go and compare it to every other bank out there. And that's just part of the game. And we're just going to have to realize that other financial institutions, when they put their rate sheets up, a lot of times the metro market, the Metro Detroit market, I'm the quickest to the table. I'm one of the better ones to structure a deal. So brokers know that. A lot of times they'll take my term sheet and they'll shop it to some of my competitors locally, trying to get a better rate, trying to get a better structure, trying to get something a little bit better for the customer. But they usually always first in order to be able to get that. And sometimes that I lose deals that way. But the majority of the time they'll end up coming back, because when I structure a deal, I try to think about who my competitors are in the local market. And I try to put it in a competitive way that I know they're not going to be able to match.
Yeah, one piece of advice I got early on, if you do want to get into a rate battle, I'll say never adjust the rate on your term sheet. For example, let's say a borrower was working with me and Ryan, and I issue my term sheet at prime 275, Ryan's at prime 250, prime 25, and the borrower comes back to me like, hey, if you can match 250, then I'll go with you. If I update my term sheet and send it back to them, they're going to hand it right over to Ryan and say, I need 2.25 as Chris is at 2.5. So what you should do is say, hey, Ryan's a great guy. I think I can beat that rate or match that rate. Why don't you just initial the term sheet for me and send it back? Internally, I'll let them know that we agreed to it based on you striking out the rate and initialing it. What that does, It prevents you having an additional term sheet out there with a lower rate that's in the atmosphere that can be shopped around. They're only going to have your initial term sheet that you issued at the highest rate. Now, when they initial it and sign it and send it back into you, the other banker's not going to know that you agreed to, hey, if you initial it and drop the rate, I'll honor that. They're not going to know that. So that's something that I have always done in my career. If it's a rate battle and a deal I really want to win, I'll say, hey, that's fine. Strike out the rate, put 2.5 on it, send it in. I'll let my team know that we agreed to 2.5, but I'm not updating my initial term sheet with another rate, because they're just going to flip that to the other lender to get a lower rate from that other bank.
That's right. Yeah, that's excellent advice. Perfect advice. I'm glad I'm not the only one that does that too. That's gold BDOs right now. There's a lot of BDOs out there that wish you didn't say that, Chris. That's gold right now, man. That's perfect. I love it.
Yeah, sorry, that might be too much free game, but yeah, that's a big one if you can figure that out too. It might have disrupted the industry. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing you got to remember, especially when it comes to winning those price battles, there's really different types of SBA lenders that are out there. I'm never going to win a price war against some of these large banks that you see on every street, right? If it's Chase, if it's Wells Fargo, if it's some of these guys that are out there, in reality, they only do a certain type of paper in the first place. And so it may be A++ type paper, and they're willing to do prime plus 0 or whatever they're willing to do, or offer some type of extreme fixed rate product. You got to know who you are to the market. If you are a guy like myself or Chris or Ryan, our paper is probably a little bit more on the expensive side, but what we do offer is the speed, right? We can get you answer a lot quicker. We can get your deal closed. We may be able to work on a slightly tougher transaction and get it across the finish line. That's what you're paying for. You're paying for that execution. If you have a deal that can get done anywhere, then there's probably other banks out there that can give you the pricing that you're looking for a deal that's just a flat out no-brainer.
I was going to say that might be for another show, but not all banks are created equal, because you will have financial institutions that do SBA, they do commercial, they do small business, they do middle market, they do corporate, they've got treasury, they've got everything. They're a huge conglomerate. So when you go in with your SBA, one person brings the loan in, then they have to hand it off to somebody else, then somebody else. And it's this hierarchy that gets you lost in the shuffle. Yeah, they might have a lower rate. Yes, they might have lower fee, but it's going to take you for to close if you can close. Whereas working with a financial institution that specializes in SBA, like Sterling, Chris, and I do, you're going to get much better service. You're going to have experts in the back room, experts at the top, experts in the front, and you're going to get through the process much easier, much smoother, and it's not going to be a headache. Because let's face it, time kills all the time. And you don't want to be a financial institution that's going to drag their feet for 2, 3, 4, sometimes 6 months on a transaction that I know that myself, Sterling, and Chris can get done in under 60 days.
Yeah. And it's super important, Emily, real quick, that you have a call with the borrower, if you can, if schedules permit, before you issue a term sheet. I know we just expressed a lot about speed and turning over the term sheet, but having a call, you set the expectation of how you're structuring the deal to make sure you understand what's important to the borrower. The borrower may not give a crap about the rate. They may just be concerned about down payment. They want to do a 100% financing expansion loan, right? They don't care about the rate. You issue the term sheet at a prime 2.5 or prime 2.25, and you have a 20% down payment in there. They're like, this isn't what I want. I'm going with Sterling, who's doing 100% financing at a higher rate, right? So you have to understand when I get on those calls, hey, what's important to you? How much do you know about SBA financing? What do you know about structuring these loans? What's important to you? Is it rate? Is it down payment? Is it speed, execution? Is it collateral not being pledged? And we need to creatively structure this in a certain way. That way you can structure your term sheet one time, send it to the borrower, then get on a second call to review the term sheet together, make sure you're in agreement, nothing was missed. Then you have their complete total buy-in. And then ideally, like Ryan said, you get the loan approved and you have that commitment letter. And this is a true testament. If you're a solid, super producing, experienced BDO, that term sheet should match your commitment letter.
What about when your term sheet makes it to underwriting? Can it change there too as well, Sterling?
Yeah. So I know these guys just said that, it should match up every time between the term sheet and commitment letter. And in an ideal world, that is the way that it should work. But we live in the real world, not the ideal world, right? So there are times when my term sheet is going to change.
Call them out. Call them out.
I want to hear names.
Who's always asking for a seller note around here? Call them out. Let's make it spicy. Yeah. Name drop.
We need a seller note and a rich uncle, and we need a lot of things. But no, I mean that happens sometimes, and that's part of the business as well. I think that the main thing that I try and do with my customers is I try and always be transparent. If I feel like there's a reason why this deal could get restructured or something that we're not going to like about this transaction, I usually have that discussion on the first call, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, because I want them to know, hey, you know what? You only bought your first business 6 months ago. You're trying to buy your second business. We might not be okay with doing this as an expansion. You might need to bring some money into this deal. And so when you have those types of conversations up front, even when you go through underwriting, if they come back and say, hey, we feel like we need 10% down or something like that in this transaction because the guy just doesn't have enough track record yet. Well, I mean, you go back to the guy and you said, hey, I told you this might happen. And it did happen. And, they still feel like you tried to fight for them. they still feel like you were their advocate inside of the bank that was trying to fight to get their deal done the way that they wanted it done, the way that they wanted it structured. And so as long as you're transparent with people, you just tell them, hey, this is what it is, and here's what we tried to do. We didn't get there, and this is the deal that I can get done for you. And I've had success with that. Most people are accepting.
Yeah, set expectations early. Set them up front. And as a BDO, you know when you're structuring a deal you think you can get done, even if you've run it by others within your credit department. If it's one of those that's on the fence, I think I can get away with this. Yeah, 10% down, but we've got some wonky trends going on here in the last couple of years. My credit underwriter, depending on who the underwriter is, might want to adjust things here and there. Send them up front. Say, look, man, I'm on the fence with this. I know we have a deal here. I know we can get it done. I'm 100% confident of that. This is the structure that I have in front of you. We may need a seller note. We may need a little bit more money down, but I don't think we need so right now. Let me talk to my underwriter, but don't be surprised that if he comes back and asks for an extra 5%, or because you don't have any direct industry experience and the structure is so big with so many moving parts that we ask the seller to have some type of skin in the game post-closing with a seller note. So don't be surprised that happens. I just want to set the table and have those conversations now before we submit it into underwriting. So if something like that does come up, it's not going to be a surprise, because I hate surprises. I know you hate surprises, and I want to make sure that everybody's still on board. So have those conversations now, make sure everybody's on board. Let me know if we're good to go, and I'll hit the button and get it into an underwriter. That's generally the type of conversations that I'm a little bit on the fence with the structure that I have.
What about when you guys get a deal that will work, but you're kind of not sure? Do you still provide a term sheet, or do you provide feedback to your borrower?
If it's a deal that I'm really not sure we're going to get done, then usually I'm just going to tell them that this is probably not the perfect home for it. Yeah, because I don't want to waste their time and I want to waste my time. If it's a deal that I just know is not going to be a perfect fit here, then it's best for them to just move on and go find the lender that's going to be able to get their deal across the finish line. If I feel like it's got I would say 60% chance or more of being a fit for us, then usually I'll have that honest conversation like what I was talking about with Ryan, and just tell him, hey, here, we may be able to get it done. We may not be able to get it done. If it's a deal that is going to go to a committee, I will always pre-flight it, especially if it's a deal that's a little bit on the skinny side. If I feel like there's a reason why we won't be able to get it across the finish line. So $1 million or more, I'm going to put a pre-flight summary together. I'm going to have that discussion internally before I issue the term sheet, because I don't want any surprises in committee. I never want to get there and then find out that we don't like a deal. I have a pretty good finger on the pulse in terms of what we will do and what we won't do. However, I have been mistaken before, right? I think we all remember the Safari loan. So these things do happen from time to time, but especially on the smaller deals, if I feel like it's a deal that will get done, I'll just issue the term sheet on it. If I feel like maybe not, then I just try not to waste people's time.
What do you guys think the most important thing about issuing a term sheet is?
Being able to honor it.
Good.
Specifically the terms on the term sheet. Now, you can't always guarantee that the loan will be approved because things happen. The credit manager might have a bad experience with that industry, or there might be a bunch of loans going bad and you just didn't know that, right? But the terms indicated on that term sheet, structure, rate, down payment, term of repayment, collateral included, is the same on the commitment letter from the term sheet.
Yeah, that you probably hit the nail right on the head. Being able to stand behind your term sheet, knowing that the term sheet you put in front of your customer not only is the best terms for the bank that approved, but it's also the best terms for what their need is. I believe you said something earlier, Chris. Just knowing, all right, they want to put down the least amount of money. Cash flow is good. The structure is good. So rate's not important to them. Their importance is liquidity. So they need more working capital in the loan. They have less money down to keep more money in their pocket. You got to be able to pick up on those things because there are a lot of banks out there, and I'm a pick on them because I love the David and Goliath story. There's a lot of big banks out there.
Call them out.
I'm going to call them out right now. There's a lot of big banks, and I've got an 800-pound gorilla sitting right in my backyard that I go toe-to-toe with almost every single day, and they can only win things on rate. They can only win things on an interest rate.
Would you say you're hunting gorillas?
Maybe. Maybe a little bit.
Okay, got it.
or would you say you're in the trees with maybe some oak trees?
Oh no, they don't come into my
What am I
forest that
missing?
often. They're a little too scared.
It's Ray's probably laughing so hard at this, but it's very niche lender BDO jokes we just told there. But the main thing is you want to have a conversation. What I want to stress, have a conversation with your borrower up front before you issue a term sheet, if you can, to understand what's important there when you're structuring that deal. So I've had times where I may not have done that, and they would say, hey, well, actually, the seller's going to hold a note for $500,000 because they want us to be successful, and it's going to be less leverage for us, leverage at a lower rate. And it actually saves you time as a BDO. Time, we talked about that before, or we'll be talking about that soon. It is so valuable as a BDO. So if you're structuring a term sheet without talking to your borrower to understand the transaction and what's important, you're going to have to redo that term sheet again and go back and type it over again based on the conversation because you didn't have the initial conversation. So you've just done it twice. And also your borrower might lose a little bit of confidence in seeing two term sheets come back from you. Like, just even though you didn't necessarily make a mistake, you're having to do something again, and they might question, well, gosh, do this twice. What else is going to be duplicated in this process here?
And that just goes back to an episode we had a couple weeks back, on site visits. Know your customer, know what they're doing, know what kind of deal you have. You don't want to slap a term sheet out there, have a structure and a writing, and all of a sudden find in the process that they have a burlesque license, right? You want to know right up front what they've got going on before you start putting commitments out there or term sheets out there into the atmosphere.
Do you guys remember your first term sheet as new BDOs? Like, can you remember what the deal was?
It was sweet. It was a good term sheet. It was quick though.
It was a sweet term sheet.
It was a sweet term sheet. It was quick.
It was
What is it? Prom night? What are you talking about?
It was my first term
what
sheet.
Are you, a sweet term sheet?
So I grew.
He's got it like in a frame.
Yeah, it was quick. What is?
So term sheet in the beginning of my career, term sheets were not the norm. I was in a corporate environment, worked for corporate banks, did SBA.
They were typewriters. Sorry.
Oh, I knew we couldn't.
He had to put the first one in block with a chisel.
Yeah, on a piece of stone.
Oh my goodness, I'm getting shots fired at me all day.
That yellow legal pad.
Those are different times, man. Those are the 90s, back of the napkin type stuff. They were at the lunch table.
But he adds to it with his notepad that he shows everybody.
Was literally back of the napkin, kind of.
They didn't even sign. He said, "Just give me a handshake and look me in the eyes."
It was a handshake deal, yeah. Right. Back in the good old days, man.
I worked at a community bank where that was kind of the norm. So, but we didn't do term sheets. I didn't do term sheets until probably about 2000. Stop it. About 2013, 2014. Prior to that, it really was just, this is the structure. Do you like it? Yeah. Everything is good. Send it into committee, send it into underwriting, and you would go straight to commitment letter. You really didn't have a term sheet. Term sheets started coming out once more SBA shops started going national. Yeah, once the market started getting saturated with SBA shops nationally across state lines, and once they started coming into Michigan, which was probably around 2014, 2015, and I started sending emails or having phone calls. Yeah, this is what I could do. You only need this amount down. I can go this many years. I can do this, that, and the other. We'll get the deal done. And then the deal would go, well, why did you choose that bank over ours? I had a structure different. Well, they gave it to me in writing. They gave me a pre-approval, I would call it, or a term sheet up front. And that's when I started thinking, oh, okay, I got to find out what this is so I can start putting my deals out on a term sheet. And ever since then, on every deal I've done, especially since I've gone national, I went national in 2016. Ever since I've done that, I've had a term sheet on every single deal.
Not to hijack this topic here, but what is it with people asking for pre-approvals? Do you guys get that where people reach out to you and ask you for pre-approvals on a commercial loan? Like, there is no such thing. Because it does not exist.
There is no
it is not worth the paper
it doesn't exist.
Right.
And it's usually business owners or business buyers that are first-time business buyers that are used to getting a mortgage. Or what we're seeing right now in this economy is people are getting away from acquiring commercial real estate, acquiring residential real estate, and getting into acquiring businesses because they're getting better ROI on their money. They're getting better returns. They're becoming the master of their own destiny by acquiring and running a business that they're used to getting pre-approvals by the local mortgage guy or pre-approvals by the local lender. Whereas we on the SBA side, on the commercial side, period, we don't do pre-approvals. They just don't exist. We will give you the terms that we are willing to structure a deal. And I make that very clear on the emails when I send out my term sheet. I say, these are the terms that First Internet advances acquisition. And I want to make it very clear that it's not a pre-approval or a pre-qualification. It is an actual term sheet. But I'm with you, Sterling. I get those calls all the time. And they're usually, let's face it, mortgage isn't really doing all that great right now. They're usually mortgage brokers that are trying to get into the brokerage world, which is fine. Everybody's got to change with the times, but you got to understand the terminology and get with an SBA lender that knows what they're doing.
But I did want to end with this. BDOs, I know if you're new to the game or you have a fun story about your first term sheet or you've been in it for a while, send it over to the BDO Show at gmail.com. And we like to read through those types of stories. So if you have a sweet story like Ryan did, we would love to read it on the episode just to see, where you stand with how meaningful like some of those are to you, like obviously in the infancy of your career. But anyways, we wanted to thank you for joining us today. I know we missed Alan. Next time we'll have him here. But thank you for listening. Every week gets better. We wanted just to remind you guys to submit your topics, suggestions, and anything that you hear that's new or interesting that you want us to chat about on the show. Send that over to the BDO Show at gmail.com, and we will see you next time.